only think of the artificial in the end, also as a practice. There's a very nice line by, again, the French philosopher Alain Badiou, who's a really good provocative thinker. And Badiou is talking about physics, and it's a good analogy here. He says, look, the discourse in physics is not just theories, concepts, and mathematical formulas. There are those, of course. There are also technical apparatuses and experiments. Physics as a thinking does not separate the two. I would say this is exactly parallel to where we are with the artificial hazard. That we actually cannot separate thinking about the artificial and actually to some extent making it. They're now ranked. Cannot touch them. So what we're really thinking here, though, as I stress, so keeping that in mind, that we're really thinking about this question of how the artificial constitutes the possibilities of the world. We're thinking about what the artificial makes possible, both as danger and affirmative possibility. And very interestingly, look at this proposition. This is worth thinking about. We think about this in trite ways, but I would like you to try to think about it really deeply. What does the artificial, as a condition of our time, make it possible for us to think, experience, and do in this century, which perhaps we could not think, experience, or do even in the late 20th century? And that does not mean just keeping permanent touch with your significant other, the iPhone. It doesn't just mean that. It's a bit more. What does the artificial enable us to think and experience? That's a really interesting question, I think, for us too. And this is obviously not an abstract question. It pertains to how we grasp the roles of design and technology today, and it also, of course, pertains to the question of our survival. Because we're in this enigmatic condition which I mentioned to you before. So, never has the power of destructive forces appeared unquestionable and unavoidable. And fried here on ecological and social collapse. The nexus between our species being and time is unraveling. For us, and for so many beings, what is at stake is continuity. We no longer live in a condition where our future as a species can be assumed. Grasping the significance of this knowledge changes. This is more than the fear of destruction going on here. We're now in a very interesting existential condition. The artificial possibilities are one side of this. The other side, part of those possibilities, is what we might call defuturing, the lack of a continuity. And this is where we finish up. We enter the territory of a sudden realization that the future is, for us, not assured. And this is perhaps the strangest and most uncanny human phenomenon, because past and present and future are an intrinsic part of human life. Yet all of a sudden, for us, they're not. Now we know, and I'll just try and finish around these points, that, in fact, we're already broken from the past. Barthes has a great line. We know that we are modern when we know that we can no longer organically repeat things. We know we are modern when we can no longer repeat. When repetition is just reproduction, not production. We see it most clearly. It happens 1800, 1840. Architecture. We now see this. Trinity Church in Wall Street is a sort of historic thing. It's almost like belonging to history. It's actually a piece of complete artifice. There was no Gothic cathedrals in America. It's a pity America wasn't second. It'd be nice to have some real ones. But there weren't any. This is an import. It's a sort of pop. It's a playtime. It's pretend. It's as real in its own way as Venice is. By the way, any of you, this is Venice, Las Vegas. Not the real Venice. You may prefer the Venice, Las Vegas. It's cleaner, nicer. You can probably have far more fun there. It's, in a way, artifice. This is artifice too. It is reproduction that we now produce as a kind of kitsch. Sorry?
It's in New York.
Yes, this is Wall Street, yeah. Church, but the other was last
I
week.
probably of that previously.
So we face a kind of strange condition where this rupture, the architect Peter Eisenman said back in 1984, alters not only the conditions in which we were, demanding a new level of thinking and a new practice to deal adequately with the profundity of this crisis, but alters the very possibility of history itself, as we've previously considered. What does this mean in practice? I think it means that we are plunged in some ways into a kind of non-time, particularly in the United States, much less in China. So China has a sense that it is part of the future, that it is part of history. So, which America had in the early 20th century. But right now, especially in America, probably more so here than anywhere else, we seem to feel this peculiar status, this kind of sense of no future or indistinct future, right? This kind of non-ness of time. But I think that, what I'm just saying to you now, helps to explain this peculiar condition. But to emphasize here, we also have to think on the one side of these elements which incline us to defuturing, and on the other hand, we have to think about, in a sense, the conditions of the artificial. And if we think about the conditions of destructiveness or sustainment or unsustainability, we come to yet another paradox. And that is this: that the same conditions which produce the potential of catastrophe must also be those from which we can find the means to think towards a sustainable world. They have to be one and the other. You see what I mean? If catastrophe is implicit as a possibility in the artificial, sustainment must be too. Sustainment, which I use as a shorthand for a more humane future. Sustainment doesn't happen from Orion, from outside. It doesn't happen from God's descending. It doesn't happen from a magical return to nature, because we can't do that. There is no return to nature. Nature is irrelevant to the question of sustainability. It doesn't matter anymore. What matters is discovering sustainability in the artificial. But if sustainability is possible, if a humane world is possible at all, it must be possible within the artificial, which means it must be present as a possibility within what is. So it must be made possible by the structure and dynamic of the artificial itself. So to think towards sustainment, I mean any kind of humane future, means to think the artificial. And it's only by that, I think, too, that we can get round what is the fundamental aporia behind the technological crises of our time, which is summarized by Walter Benjamin back in 1935 at the epilogue to the famous Work of Art essay. Some of you will have had to read that in classes, no doubt. Benjamin says this. He's talking about destructiveness of now. Destructiveness of now and present furnishes proof that society has not been mature enough to incorporate technology as its organ. Technology has not been sufficiently developed to cope with the elemental forces of society. This is fabulous formulation. He gets it right. Do you see what I mean? We haven't, although we have made technology, we haven't yet fully incorporated it as ours. At the same time, we haven't sufficiently developed a technology which is sensitive enough to our sentience. And this is the cause of, in a sense, much of our unhappiness. So, the only way of thinking this through now is to think what this could mean within the context of the artificial. So now we come back to the question, which should have been the first question of my lecture, the first line of my lecture, which is, what is the artificial? I don't think I've ever before managed not to get to a lecture that I was supposed to give so spectacularly. So that really should have been the first. That was what was planned for this lecture. It's taken me the entire lecture to get to it. I'm sorry, but we've gone the pretty way around starting what we'll have to look at next week, which is the dynamics of the artificial. Trying to look at the qualities in it and their relationship to design in the future. Qualities of mediation, possibilities, qualities of possibility, qualities of the propositional, which I think are inherent to the artificial. And so therefore we'll also look at the same time as to what the artificial opens, which goes beyond our current thinking, and how this perhaps binds in with designing in a wide sense of this word. Now, not designing capital D, but designing small d as a capability. All right, at that point I end. Sorry for the break. Thank you.